Today we are diving into a case that really gripped a small town, the death of Melissa Lish. We've got court documents, we've got news reports, we even found some forum discussions from, folks who actually knew Melissa. So we are going to try and give you guys a well-rounded view of what went down.
Yeah, and what went down is it's complex, to say the least.
Okay.
So Melissa was 27, an EMT, and she was found dead in her burning house the day before Thanksgiving, 2020.
Oh, wow.
And she was 9 months pregnant. So the initial assumption, of course, by a lot of people was that it was just a tragic accident. Something happened in the kitchen. But as investigators started digging, things got mucky pretty quick.
Okay, so paint us a picture here. It's the day before Thanksgiving.
Right.
Melissa's family is out celebrating.
Yeah.
It's her younger sister Julia's 17th birthday. They're picking out a cake, totally oblivious to the horror that's unfolding, back at Melissa's house.
Meanwhile, firefighters are responding to a call about a house fire.
Right.
They arrive, and they find the kitchen is engulfed in flames.
Yeah.
And it's in that kitchen that they find Melissa's body. Now, finding the victim where the fire originated is unusual in itself.
Oh, really?
So it's a red flag.
Yeah.
For investigators, was this an accident, or was this fire set intentionally to cover up something a lot more sinister?
To make things even more complicated, we've got Matthew Ploy entering the picture. Now, Ploy was a firefighter paramedic himself.
Wow.
Well-respected in the community. But here's the twist. He was secretly the father of Melissa's unborn child.
Oh, wow. So his connection to both the victim and the first responder community made him immediately a person of interest. Now, that term, person of interest, is important. Doesn't mean he's a suspect. But it does mean that investigators are taking a closer look at him and, his potential involvement in what happened.
Right, because now we're not just dealing with a potential accident. We're dealing with this web of relationships, secrets, and, possible motives.
Absolutely.
And Ploy's initial explanation, it didn't really do much to help clear things up.
Right. So his statement to investigators was that he'd gone to Melissa's house that afternoon to discuss finances for the baby. He claimed to have left. And then somehow the fire started. But investigators found inconsistencies in his alibi. Like, for instance, his phone records put him in the vicinity of Melissa's house for a much longer time than he initially said.
So you've got this discrepancy in his timeline. You've got the fire conveniently starting where Melissa's body is found.
Right.
And this whole hidden relationship. It all starts to paint a pretty suspicious picture, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And investigators noticed something else.
What's that?
That was peculiar. The burn patterns in the kitchen suggested that an accelerant was used, meaning that somebody, potentially, may have purposely helped that fire spread.
Whoa, okay. That's a huge detail.
Right.
So it's no longer just a fire. Now we're talking potential arson.
Exactly.
Which changes the whole game. So we've got a potential arson case on our hands. We've got the secret relationship. And we've got this, firefighter who is now officially a person of interest. It sounds like things escalated pretty quickly for investigators.
He did. And you got to imagine, right, the amount of pressure they were under. Because this wasn't just another fire investigation.
Yeah.
This case had shaken the entire community.
Yeah.
Everyone knew Melissa. Many people knew Ploy. So the idea that someone they trusted, could even potentially be involved was just deeply unsettling for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up the community, because I noticed in some of those forum discussions that we found, opinions were really divided. Some people were really quick to condemn Ploy, but others were, staunchly defending him, citing his reputation, as a dedicated firefighter.
Yeah, that's a common reaction. You see it a lot in cases like this. People kind of grapple with that cognitive dissonance. How can someone they perceive as good do something, so terrible? And it forces them to confront their own biases, the complexities of human nature.
Right. And it also makes you wonder about the investigators.
Yeah.
Themselves, because, they're dealing with this community that's on edge. They're dealing with a grieving family, and they're dealing with a potential suspect who is one of their own.
Exactly.
It must have been so difficult to navigate those dynamics.
Oh, absolutely.
While still trying to remain objective.
Yeah, and remember, they're not just dealing with, public pressure, but they also have to operate within the bounds of the law, right? Building a solid case.
Yeah.
Especially against someone with no prior criminal record, requires that meticulous evidence gathering. You need a solid legal strategy.
Right. So what kind of evidence were they looking for beyond those inconsistencies in Ploy's alibi and those signs of an accelerant? Was there anything that like directly linked him to the fire?
Well, investigators did uncover some pretty compelling evidence.
Okay.
For instance, they found traces of gasoline on Ploy's work boots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while he argued that this was, common because of his job as a firefighter, the type of gasoline that they found matched the type that was used as an accelerant at the crime scene.
Oh, wow.
And so this became a key piece of evidence.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I imagine investigators also looked into any potential motives, that Ploy might have had. Was there anything in their relationship or, like, in his personal life that suggested a reason for him to want to harm Melissa?
Well, there were a few things that raised eyebrows.
Okay.
Financially, Ploy was going through a difficult time. He had recently filed for bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
And was facing mounting debts. So, the impending arrival of the baby, it just would have added, another layer to his financial strain.
Right. Okay. So that's definitely a common motive in a lot of crimes, but it is still circumstantial.
Right.
Was there anything more concrete linking Ploy to the crime itself?
Well, a witness came forward and claimed to have seen Ploy's truck near Melissa's house around the time the fire started.
Mm.
And so while their testimony wasn't conclusive, it did further corroborate the timeline that investigators were building against Ploy.
Okay. So it seems like, the pieces were starting to fall into place for the prosecution. But what about Melissa's family? What was their experience like during all of this?
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, they were going through an unimaginable ordeal. Not only were they grieving the loss of Melissa and her unborn child, but they were also grappling with the possibility that someone they knew, someone who was supposed to be a protector, may have actually been responsible.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom the emotional toll that must have taken on them. I mean, to lose a loved one so tragically and then to have to fight for answers, for justice, it's a burden that no one should have to bear.
And you add in the public scrutiny,
right,
and the media attention, all the constant speculation swirling around this case, it just added another layer of stress and trauma for the family. I mean, they were dealing with immense personal grief while simultaneously navigating a very public and complex legal battle.
And it's a reminder that, behind these headlines, behind the legal proceedings, there are real people whose lives have been, completely shattered.
Absolutely.
Their story is just as important as the facts of the case.
And their pursuit of justice really became a driving force in the investigation. They were determined to ensure that Melissa's death wouldn't just be overlooked or dismissed as a simple accident. And their unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth really helped keep the pressure on investigators and ensure that, all possible angles were being explored.
Yeah, it sounds like their persistence was really crucial in moving the case forward. But what about Ploy? How did he respond to all of this? To the mounting evidence that was stacking up against him. Did he maintain his innocence?
Ploy vehemently denied any involvement in Melissa's death.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire investigation. He insisted that the evidence was circumstantial and that the investigators were, they were targeting him because of their personal relationship. He claimed to be a victim of prejudice, arguing that, his reputation as a firefighter had been unfairly tarnished.
That's a pretty compelling argument, especially given, his standing in the community. But how did the prosecution counter that? I mean, did they have enough to refute his claims and prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?
Well, they did present a strong case.
Yeah.
They argued that the accumulation of circumstantial evidence, you combine that with the forensic findings, the witness testimonies, it painted a pretty clear picture of Ploy's guilt. They highlighted, again, those inconsistencies in his alibi, the presence of the gasoline on his boots, the witness who placed him near the scene of the crime.
So it became a battle of narratives.
Right.
With Ploy claiming innocence and the prosecution presenting this web of evidence that suggested otherwise, it must have been a pretty tense time leading up to the trial.
It was. This case had captured national attention. Media coverage was relentless. Public opinion was divided. Some believed that Ploy was a victim of a witch hunt. Others were convinced of his guilt. So the stakes were incredibly high for both sides.
Okay, so the stage is set. We've got a community that is completely divided, a grieving family who is desperately seeking justice. And we've got this firefighter who's facing some very, very serious accusations. What happened when this case finally went to trial?
Well, the trial itself was a complete media spectacle. Every single detail was, just completely scrutinized and debated. The prosecution, they presented their evidence meticulously, really hammering home, the forensic findings, again, reminding everyone about the inconsistencies in Ploy's alibi, and of course, highlighting all those witness testimonies that put him at the scene.
And what about, Ploy's defense team? How did they try to counter all these arguments? Did they manage to kind of poke any holes in the prosecution's case?
So they did their best, to raise those seeds of doubt. They challenged, for instance, the reliability of the witness who said they saw Ploy's truck, arguing that their memory could be faulty. And, they also brought in some expert witnesses of their own who kind of questioned the validity of the gasoline evidence, suggesting, the cross-contamination could have happened.
So it sounds like just a classic legal battle, both sides presenting these really compelling arguments. What was the atmosphere like in the courtroom? I mean, was it tense?
The tension, you could cut it with a knife. You could feel the weight of this case on everyone who was present. Melissa's family was there, every single day.
Yeah.
And their pain, their determination, it was just palpable. And even Ploy's colleagues from the fire department, they were present too. And their faces were, just this mix of disbelief and concern.
Right. Because it's a reminder that this case, it wasn't just about, legal arguments. It was about real people.
Yeah.
Whose lives were changed forever because of what happened that night. So what was the jury's verdict?
Well, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found Matthew Ploy guilty of arson and murder.
Wow.
Yeah. And the verdict, it sent shockwaves through the community. For some, it was a confirmation of their suspicions.
Yeah.
In this instance of justice being served. But for others, it was a betrayal, a shattering of the image that they had of Ploy as, this respected first responder.
Right. It must just been, a whirlwind of emotions for everyone involved. What was the sentencing and how did Melissa's family react to the outcome?
Ploy was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And Melissa's family, while relieved that justice had been served, they expressed that no sentence could truly compensate for their loss. They spoke about Melissa's kind heart, her dedication to her work as an EMT, and the joy that she had anticipated in becoming a mother. And their words, were just this powerful reminder of the human cost of this tragedy.
It's heartbreaking to think about all the potential that was lost, all the life that was cut short. This case is such a stark reminder of the complexities of human behavior, the fragility of trust, and the devastating consequences that can come from, seemingly personal choices.
It also underscores, I think, the importance of seeking truth and accountability, even when it's difficult, even when it challenges, our perceptions of those we think we know. The Melissa Lish case, it's a story that stays with you. It prompts, I think, a lot of reflection on the choices that we make, the secrets that we keep, and how the ripple effects of our actions can impact those around us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we're left with this one lingering question. What happens now? The legal battle is over, but those emotional scars, those remain. The community is left to grapple with that shattered trust. The family has to navigate their grief, and Ploy has to face the consequences of his actions.
And maybe, for you, the listener, this case serves as a reminder to cherish the moments that we have, to be mindful of the impact our choices have on the people around us, and to truly value that pursuit of truth and justice, no matter how difficult the path may be.